time only while supplies last. Contact store for availability.
Oh, and Hogan of Fat. Anything.
M&T Bank presents CEOs You Should Know, powered by iHeartMedia. Let's meet Anders Jones. He is the CEO and co-founder of Facet, a financial planning company offering a variety of services to help individuals manage their finances. They provide expert financial advice, personalized financial planning, and access to financial experts, all at a flat fee memberships. Before we talk more with Anders about his company, I first asked him to talk a little bit about himself, where he's from, and his origin story.
I grew up in Boston, went to Stanford undergrad, and graduated in the spring of 2009, which, up until probably the spring of 2020 was arguably the worst possible time to graduate. I think 75% of my class didn't have a job. So I ended up joining the early team of a startup. That was kind of the only thing to do out there at the time. And so I was on the early team of a company that eventually became known as LiveRamp, which is in the advertising technology space. Right now it's a publicly listed company, so very early on got exposure to the entrepreneurial journey and being a startup guy, and was there for 4 years. We actually ended up selling it to a company called Axiom, which then subsequently spun it out into a public company, but got an early taste for entrepreneurship and haven't looked back since.
Well, listen, I know that, because I had a kid just go through college, and I remember with my college years that sometimes you're figuring out what you're trying to do. And you mentioned about how auspicious it was when you were getting out into the real world, and you probably had a plan, but it sounds like you had to pivot. And I was talking this series when we talk to entrepreneurs and people that are leading companies, that pivoting during tough times is absolutely imperative to do. Also taking chances, and there's a lot of other buzzwords that we use out there, but it sounds like you really had to pivot. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, when you always have a plan and it doesn't come to fruition, you either have to, or get off the pot. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. Certainly in my career, I thought that I was going to go work on Wall Street when I was in college, and that didn't end up happening. And I ended up in the tech world. And now, funny enough, given that I run a fintech company, I'm like sort of have a foot in both camps. It's funny how that sort of unfolded the way that it didn't. But I'd say personally, certainly there were pivots, and then also, professionally, when I think about some of the things that we've done at Facet, when we first started the company, we had a totally different go-to-market strategy that we invested a lot of time and resources in, and spent millions of dollars pursuing. And then, about 2.5 years in, one day we just woke up and realized, this isn't working. And you kind of have to really kind of walk away from these sunk costs, and it's a very painful thing. Sometimes you get tied up emotionally where it's like, this is something that I thought would work, and having to admit that you're wrong, that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to do. But then there's also the sort of practical and, financial and logistical, aspects of that. I mean, it impacted jobs, it impacted, certainly our finances, but then ultimately we found the right path, and the rest has been a success story. But it's going in, and I think the sort of axiom that I always follow is seek truth, right? It's like it's actually better to find what is accurate than to be right, and I think that's served us pretty well in the last few years.
All right, well, you're CEO and co-founder of Facet. We're going to talk a lot about mission, what you do, your programs, your capabilities, and everything about the company. But I always like to start from the origin of the idea. You and your partners and people that are on the team saw a hole in the industry that maybe, hey, listen, I think we might have an idea here where it's not being serviced properly. I think we can execute something here that could be cool. Can you talk about the origin of the idea of the company?
For sure. So after we sold LiveRamp, one of the guys who was on the board, again, named Patrick McKenna, he and I had worked really closely together, in a variety of roles at LiveRamp. And we said, hey, let's keep working together. So we did some early stage investing together. We were looking at companies outside of Silicon Valley. We both lived in San Francisco at the time. And so that's actually, funny enough, what led us to Baltimore. And, part of the origin story of Facet is I moved there in 2015, kind of sight unseen, and started the company there. But, we were like, all right, let's invest in